Good evening. I would like to call the Thursday, September 16, 2021 regular Board of Education meeting to order. The time is 7:02 p.m. If we can do a roll call, starting with Diane.
Diane Derosa, liaison from the Board of Finance.
Joe Zuzell, board member.
Amanda Veneziano, Board Secretary.
Tom Barry, Superintendent.
Heather Pennant, Board Chair.
Christopher Aker, Vice Chair.
Patricia Schiavone, Board Clerk.
Caitlin O'Leary, Business Manager.
Allie.
Allison Smith, Board Member.
Joe.
Joe Margaret, Board Member.
Don Maria, Director of Educational Services.
Katie Ariano, Principal at Gilead Hill.
Michael Larkin, Principal at Hebron Elementary School.
Thank you. So we can all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, Dr. Baird, is the recognition of Wayne Derosa.
So Wayne, I don't see Wayne here. Wayne is a behind-the-scenes individual. As you know, our Director of Facilities, Wayne Derosa, retired over the summer. And we wanted to recognize him formally at the meeting. And so hopefully he's watching out there, because I wasn't sure if he wanted to really come in person. We did recognize him with a gift from the board, from the district over the summer, at a kind of a luncheon over the summer. Wayne worked here for 31 years. He's agreed to be in contact with our new facilities director as needs may arise, or to the building committee in town should needs arise. But we thank Wayne for his service, and maybe all join me in expressing that kind of thanks.
Yes, so Heather Pennant, I just want to say I'm hoping Wayne is watching at least, but you know, he's so valuable, and he has been so valuable to our schools. He's like the town historian. You know, everything that's happened in the school buildings, from the roofs on down to the basement. And so I just want to say thank you so much, Wayne, for your dedication and service to our district. We really appreciate it, and we really will miss you. So next is public comment. So the Hebron Board of Education values the public comment period, as it represents an opportunity for members of the public to express their views to the board on matters within the board's authority. Procedurally, public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person, and citizens will be asked to identify themselves. All comments must be directed to the board and not to any individual board member or individual member of the administration. The board and the administration will not respond to questions or engage in dialogue during the public comment period. The board and the administration will determine when and how to address questions that arise during the public comment period. So we do have 3 individuals that have indicated they'd like to make public comment. The first is Kim Hill. So do you want to come up to the microphone?
Hello.
Good evening.
So, as mentioned, I'm Kim Hills, and I know I've communicated with a lot of you before about our concerns with education. And so I grew up in town, my husband grew up in town, we have a family business in town, and I also teach at RAMP. And I say that just so everyone knows that we are invested in the community and in the children of our community. And I just have a few points that I'd like to make this evening. And one of them is that I feel that we all should notice that we're on the same team. And we all want the best for the kids of this community, and perhaps where we're differing is the strategy to get there. And of course we want them to become good citizens and well educated, and of course we want them to be safe as well. Whatever choice families are making is a difficult choice, whether they're deciding to send their children to school and have them mask and potentially have educational challenges or now being quarantined, and some of our students have been back in school for a day or a day and a half, and these really restrictive quarantine procedures are interrupting their education. My husband and I decided to homeschool because we want our children to learn math trade. And my kindergartner needs to learn to read this year, and she needs to see her teacher's face to do that. So I think another piece that's missing is the mutual respect for those difficult choices that families are making. Just because one family chooses or prefers parental choice and another does not, doesn't mean that we need to dislike or hate each other, and we need to model that for our children. I think that's missing right now in this community. We're aware that the mitigation strategies that are coming from the state of Connecticut are most of them are out of your control, at this point, at least. I believe with the exception of quarantine, I think Chatham Health is kind of making sense of that and making it real, try to work for our population. But like I previously mentioned, there's a huge interruption because of these procedures in our children's learning, and that should be addressed. And we need to look at a risk analysis and say, these kiddos that are asymptomatic or maybe potentially exposed aren't in school and are back on Zoom and trying to use Seesaw, right, to learn again, versus being in school. We need to really look hard, are we making the right choice for our children? I was also under the impression that there's new legislation this year that says that remote learning is not an option. So I'm a little confused on how we have elementary schools remote learning when there's that legislation I thought said that remote learning was not an option. So we're maybe not following that legislation, but we have to follow the math legislation or the other mitigation strategies. So that's something to think about. And then in the event that Governor Lamont's extension of powers does not happen, what's in place from our Board of Education to represent all families in the Hebron community to make the best choice for families and for children? There are medical professionals that think that if they're asymptomatic, that they can be in school. And of course, if anyone is ill, and we could have done a better job of this pre-COVID, don't go to school, don't go to work, stay home and get better. I think that strategy does need to stay. But we were falsely led to believe that vaccines would get us back to normal. And now we're back here, and the government has moved the goalpost and said we're going to change the rules. Yes, vulnerable had a chance to get vaccinated, staff had a chance to get vaccinated, and now here we are, kids still masked, still having interruption in learning, and now what are we going to do about that? And when are they're going to change it again on us? So we need to get back to normal. We need to treat this virus as a virus that's going to be with us always, and allow kids to be back in school, and really allow parental choice for what's best for their children. I think I just got dinged, huh? And we're using data from PCR tests that were giving false positives, right? And now they got rid of that PCR test and we have a new test. How is that valid, reliable data? So I just think we need to, as a group, prepare if what's going to happen with this extension of powers, and just give parents the choice for their children. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. All right, next is Danielle Luca.
I'm actually going to decline.
Okay.
Decline.
And then Alana Quinto.
Hello, I also previously sent in an email a couple months ago, and I have children at Gilead Hill School and Hebron Elementary School, and I'm active on the PTA this year, so I also am very invested in the community and in all of the children here. And I just wrote a little short letter that I'm just going to read, basically saying that I urge the board to support parental choice when Governor Lamont's emergency powers expire. My name and my husband's names are the only ones on our children's birth certificates, no one else's. Parents should have the right to choose to send our children to school without a mask. And if other parents choose to have their children wear a mask, that's okay too. This should be the parent's choice. We all love and want what's best for our children, and the government and school board should not be issuing mandates that remove this parental choice. Pro or anti-vaccine, it doesn't matter. I stand with all parents who believe that they should be making the choice for masking and vaccinating for themselves and for their families. Not the government, not coercion by the government, not threatening of kicking out students out of school without distance learning if they are unvaccinated and exposed. While we should always respect each other's perspectives, ultimately no one else's opinion matters when it comes to my children. We need to give our children back their childhoods, their mental well-being, and their freedoms. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't know I had to sign up to make a comment. Is there a-
Yes,
I don't have a big prepared anything.
you certainly can, and
Okay,
we'll bring the sign-up sheet right over.
You always have people who want to, yeah.
Sorry.
There you go.
Thank you. Just wouldn't mind stating your name for the record.
Yes, so I'm Sarah Valero. I have 2 kids at Gilead Hill. And I just wanted to come and thank the board for everything they did last year, during this entire time, protecting our kids and making some really tough decisions. I'm actually a COVID nurse. I've been caring for COVID patients since day one. And that has obviously been a really challenging time, and so I've seen a lot of tough things, and I've been caring for this virus and the patients it affects and their families. And I know how confusing all of this can be as far as changing protocols, as ours have changed a million times. I just thank you for thinking of our children and their safety. My gut feeling is that masking is helping our kids stay safe. We've had 2 close calls in the last few weeks, and it's been very stressful. Quarantining, and I think the teachers we have done a tremendous job transitioning almost seamlessly into learning at home. We made some big family decisions and had me go to work full-time and my husband stay home because the hospital needed more staff and our kids needed consistency at home. So that has allowed us, and I know not every family can do that kind of thing, but it's been a big change for everyone, and I just really want to appreciate what you're doing and how hard it is to do this stuff. So thank you.
All right, is there anyone else who'd like to make a public comment at this time? See anyone else here? Thank you all very much for taking the time out to come and give public comment. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes. So I would ask for a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of August 5th, 2021 as presented.
So moved.
Joe Zuzell moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Christopher Akers, second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, board secretary, if you could take a roll call.
No one person? Okay. Chris Aker?
Aye.
Heather Pettit?
Aye.
Amanda Veneziano? Aye. Joe Zuzell?
Joe Zuzell, aye.
Ali Schmeisel?
Alice Michael, aye.
Joe Margaitis?
Joe Margaitis, aye.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. Motion passed unanimously. I think because we have 2 board members joining us by phone.
Got it, okay.
All right, so next is Dr. Baird and team, or maybe Dr. Baird?
It will be team,
Update and team.
All right, I'm gonna move, our team is gonna sort of be up, sort of standing over there, and we're gonna be presenting up here, so Heather and Amanda, if you need to shuffle, feel free. Come on up. All right, right, well, as it comes up, I've got slide number 1. So you see a big team in front of you. The only administrator that's not part of the preschool conversation is Laura, and set up. He's going to do a job tonight for the rest of us.
I'm sorry, Dr. Greg, to interrupt you for 1 second.
Yes.
Are those extra that maybe the audience?
Yeah, there are some here. Would you like a copy of the presentation?
Okay, I don't know, but I just thought I would make it available.
So when we're talking about preschool, we're talking about a big team that's working on this kind of project. We're going to take you through what we think is a pretty comprehensive look at different options for preschool expansion. We didn't have the time to be able to do an exhaustive look at any one particular option because we really need some assistance from the board to know what we need to zero in on. So that's really what we're doing tonight is a big overview to get a sense of where the board might want to go next. We're going to ask you a whole questions until the end because there's a lot of information throughout the presentation, and we just want to sort of get it all out there and then see what questions you have at the end if that's okay. All right?
Sure. So the first 2 slides are actually a little bit of a quick overview and repeating of information. You might remember a couple of years ago we did a pre-K study, and these were the benefits of pre-K that very large team identified. So just to sort of set the stage as we talk about expanding pre-K, a little bit here about the benefits of a preschool experience, which I know you all talked about before and recognize, but there's a lot of benefits towards the way that they transition to kindergarten. There gives them opportunities to socialize, to develop their social emotional skills. It allows for early intervention for students. And then the last 4 bullets are gains that we see later on into their school year. So it's sort of, you continue to reap the benefits of preschool. This is sort of a quick summary of all the research that is out there supporting schooling for 3 and 4-year-olds. And it goes from kindergarten readiness to the cognitive, the social, the behavioral, the family engagement, and then it also exposes our students to unified arts experiences. And these can be seen no matter what your program is. And I think, as we talked about before, we see these benefits from our students that are able to benefit from our preschool program now.
So I'll take over from there. Similar to kind of setting the stage for the conversation ahead. This year round, we just talked about what the evidence suggests around preschool. So also similar to a couple of years ago, some best practices we thought we'd start off tonight with. And then some pros and cons for us to consider as we move into the conversation on some of the number crunching Ms. O'Leary has done for us. So research does suggest very strongly and repeatedly the best practices surrounding successful and effective preschool programs. Some of the highlights are highly qualified certified teachers that receive ongoing professional development and learning opportunities across their working year, adequate time, planning for time and collaboration with colleagues. We know that best practices around preschool programs focus in on and underscore the importance of a comprehensive social-emotional learning approach for our youngest learners. Also, best practices of effective preschool programs dedicate and invest a lot of time in implementation of evidence-based practices, on building strong connections both between the student and the teacher, and the student and the school, and the teacher and families. So all those are best practices associated with effective preschool programs. So some pros and cons for the board to consider as we move forward in the presentation tonight. First, the pros. The educational and social benefits, as described in prior slides, all exist in Hebron's early childhood program, and we feel really proud to say that. All Hebron families would have the option to attend our program if we move down the path of decision-making around universal pre-K. We'll talk more about what that means and what that looks like. Another pro of a pre-K expansion for Hebron would be the need for an annual lottery would go away. So we know we've lived through it for years at this point. It's a moving target. Every year there are different varying sizes of wait lists. So by expanding preschool, it would eliminate the need for that lottery process. Another pro to consider would be that it would offer equitable programming and supports for all of our Hebron learners from ages 3 and up. A final pro is that it may attract additional families into our community, which is something we're always striving to do. Some cons or perhaps reflective thoughts for the board to consider as we move forward in the presentation. Of course, no budgetary strain related to staffing, professional development, furniture, supplies, and facilities, and we'll be going into those in depth coming up. Additional physical space requirements would be required, which would displace kindergarten classrooms and the prep program perhaps, as well as additional needs for storage. There'd be an increased need for parking, as well as traffic considerations for drop off and pickup. Also, expansion may impact other community-based preschool programs, which I know a few years ago was certainly a conversation. And finally, the question of if you build it, will they come? So if we expand the preschool program, understanding the fluctuations from year to year, will we be filling all those seats? So those are the effective cons to consider as I hand the baton off to Ms. O'Leary.
So as we go into the second part of the presentation, you're going to see there's 5 different scenarios, right, for our preschool expansion. I just want to talk a little bit about some of the definitions here. So our current preschool program as it exists has 4 classrooms. One of those classrooms is, as you know, it's a half-day program, so 12 students in the morning and 12 students in the afternoon. Looking at those 4 classrooms together, there are 61 what we're calling full-time equivalent students. Full-time equivalent meaning our half-day students, AM and PM together, that classroom is considered 12 full-time equivalent students. Preschool expansion, you're going to see a consideration of adding 1 classroom, 2 classrooms, or 3 classrooms, and what that might look like, and some things to consider as we think about how to potentially expand the program. And then you're also going to see what it would look like to offer a true universal preschool program. And universal preschool program is a free preschool experience to every 3-year-old and every 4-year-old here in Hebron. So in order to do that, NESDEC is projecting that we would need to have 200 plus seats available for preschool. So you'll see what 200 preschool seats looks like so that we could have a true universal preschool program. As we go through, we know that our goals here are to expand the preschool seats where we can, and what makes sense for our district, and eliminate disproportionality in our special ed student distribution across preschool classes. And I'm just going to hand it off to Dr. Baird for a second if you want to speak to that.
Sure.
So I think
So the Connecticut Department of Education expects that as you're expanding programs or looking at school configurations, that you are looking at disproportionality across student demographics within your programming. Currently, there is disproportionality in our students with disabilities, the way that we have our classes configured. So we took it as a goal amongst ourselves to eliminate that disproportionality in any expansion model. So you're going to see that throughout the presentation.
All right, so I'm going to talk about all 5 of those preschool experiences at once, and we're going to go through 5 different considerations. So the first we're going to talk about is the program capacity across all 5 models, then what that means for our physical space, what would some one-time financial investments be that we would have to consider 1 year to get the program up and running and then never again, and then what does staffing look like for those programs, and what are other ongoing financial investments outside of staffing. So you can see each component that we needed to consider side by side. So the first one is our program capacity. So as we already talked about, our current configuration is 4 rooms with 61 full-time equivalent classrooms. You can see those 4 boxes represent each room, 61 students together. Our expanded model looks at moving to a program that offers a full-day preschool experience for all students. When we move to the full-day program and we are able to, as we talked about on the previous slide, reduce the disproportionality in special education student representation in the classes. That one AM PM class that used to have 12 students really physically could fit 15 students in that classroom. So we're able to increase by 3 students in that classroom. There's another smaller physical space, which can only, by NIAC standards, hold 15 students. And then all of our other classrooms have the capacity to serve 17 students. So that's why you see 15 students in 2 classrooms and all the other classrooms have 17. So the one additional classroom, we go up to 81 full-time equivalent students. Our, what I'm calling expanded B is adding a second classroom for a total of 6 classrooms and 98 full-time equivalent students. Expanded C is 7 classrooms, so that's adding 3 new classrooms and 115 full-time equivalent students. And then our universal preschool program would have 209 full-time equivalent students. Like we were saying, that's what the NESDEC projection of all of the 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds here in Hebron, and that would require 13 rooms. So what does that mean for our current physical space? If we make no change to the program, we have our current program, we have no change needed. Expanding even just one program, we already have limitations on our outdoor space and what that looks like for outdoor playtime for the preschool program. And we know that we would need to have a new playscape outside with even expanding for those additional 20 full-time equivalent students. The other physical space need would be to adding that classroom means taking one of our current kindergarten classrooms and repurposing it for preschool, and that has to do with where the bathroom is physically located compared to the space of the classroom. So those are NIAC standards that he can talk. Mrs. Uriano can talk a little bit more too, but moving preschool into the kindergarten classroom, the kindergarten gets displaced, and the only current available space right now is a storage space, so we would need to invest in some storage. You want to talk to the bathroom? Sure, so the bathrooms for a NIAC preschool classroom, the toilet has to be 40 feet from the learning space. And so that's why our kindergarten, we have 4 kindergarten classrooms that have a bathroom in the room. And so those would be the only rooms in that area that meet that standard, which is why we would need to move a kindergarten classroom to another classroom in the school.
In the storage space we're talking about, we have a classroom right now that's used for storage. So we're not talking about putting a class in a storage space or repurposing storage somewhere else and reusing that class.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes.
So in our expanded B model, when we're adding 2 classrooms, again, we need the playscape, again, we need the outdoor storage space for storage. And then the second classroom would need to move to the prep space. So we would have to consider what would happen, where that prep program would be displaced because of that preschool program and all of the very tiny furniture that comes along with it. Expanded C is the same, sort of the same thing, except there are 2 prep classrooms. Both of those prep classrooms would become kindergarten classrooms. Yes, would become kindergarten classrooms. The preschool program now is taking over those 3 kindergarten classrooms. So this is the movement that would happen with the 3 additional classrooms. And then when we get to our universal model, we've run out of space. So we need to put an addition on the building.
And renovate as new the current building.
Yes. So that is a consideration there. So that sort of leads into the next slide, one-time financial investments. Nothing needed for our current configuration. It's about $121,000 worth of one-time financial needs. That's our $100,000 playscape, about $6,000 for the storage facility, and $15,000. That little icon down there represents classroom furniture. So expanded B and expanded C are the same thing, except just adding $15,000 per classroom for the classroom furniture. And we really don't have a figure for the universal preschool program because of the needed expansion of the building. Okay, so stay with me here on the staffing, because I know what you're looking at on your page. There's a lot of there's a lot of information, but this will come in one at a time. So when we're thinking about staffing, the first thing we have on this slide here is our classroom teachers. There's one classroom teacher per classroom. So you can see 4, 5, 6, 7, and 13 right across. That's the same need for our classroom paraprofessionals, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 13. The totals that you see next to each of those icons are salaries, payroll taxes, and health insurance, and they're all based on the average salary and the average health benefits that teachers are taking, and the same thing with our paraprofessionals. I just looked at the average of our current individuals in that position. We have a school readiness clerk now, which is a 0.07 full-time equivalent to do some clerking of our school readiness meetings and also oversee our tuition invoicing and fee collection. And that's really only sustainable with one additional classroom. When we move to 2 additional classrooms, we really think that with all the additional program invoicing, we'd really have to increase that to a half-time position. So that's on expanded B and expanded C. And if we're adding 9 additional classrooms for a total of 13 preschool classrooms, we really think one FTE administrative assistant would be necessary.
It's really looking at how much capacity does our clerical staff here at Gilead Hill have now? And if we're adding basically the equivalent of 2 additional grade levels, you really need some more administrative assistance support.
We also have, in addition to the classroom paraprofessionals, there's some one-on-one paraprofessionals that are working with identified students. Right now, there's 2 half-time special ed pairs that are working. But if we moved to the full-day program, that would change the FTE of those students with needs, and we would have to have 3 full-time paraprofessionals, and that would sort of stay standard at any size of the program, just because we know that we're already servicing all of the special ed students that have a need in grades or in ages 3 and 4, and we don't see that expanding with expanding our program. Did I explain that? Do you want to explain it more?
Nope, that's fine.
Okay, good, okay. The experts behind me, make sure I did it okay. All right, so the next position is the assistant principal position. We talked a little bit about this last year during budgeting time. The reason that the total salary you see is $30,435 is that's the net increase. If we take we would repurpose that dean of students position. So rather than having a dean of students, we would have an assistant principal, and to shift from that dean of students to an assistant principal, the net increase is $30,000 there.
And that really is required under NIAC standards as well.
There's some other logistical considerations for a program like this, and this is lunch coverage. So we have to have certain, staff to student ratio in the rooms at all times. So, and we also have to provide lunch for our staff. So we'd have to have a half-time paraprofessional in just to cover lunches, so that we're keeping to our appropriate staff to student ratios. So you see that increase across all of our expanded models. The next one is a special education teacher. So if we're moving to 5 classrooms and our special ed student population is sort of dispersed across 5, 6, 7, or 13 rooms, we would move to a special ed service model similar to what you're seeing in Gilead Hill and Hebron.
The word out of my mouth, that's exactly right.
Doing it, they taught me well, okay. So that's why we would propose to include a special ed teacher in those expanded models. And then more logistics. We don't, in our kindergarten, if we're moving our kindergarten classrooms out of the room where they currently have a bathroom in their room into a different room where the bathrooms are down the hall, we would be putting a para in each of those kindergarten classrooms so that there would be somebody to bring some of our youngest learners to the bathroom safely. And we would only be displacing up to 3 kindergarten classrooms in any of these models. So that's why it stays at 3 for the universal. Because if we're adding an addition, why not just put the bathroom in the room so we have that part taken care of? I think okay, so that was it for staffing. That was a lot of information, so I'll pause for a second. I don't want to go into like too many questions, but before I go any further, is there a question about staffing?
I'm writing them as we go.
Okay, great. So I'll pause so you can write them down, but I'll keep going. Okay, so other financial investments beyond just staffing. We purchased snacks for our preschool programs, classroom supplies, professional development, and our school readiness liaison. Those are what those icons represent. So the snacks just based on what we spent on snacks last year, and I just used the calculation to expand for each of the increase in FTE students. For each of the classroom supplies, we spend $500 a year on each classroom, so it's however many classrooms in each model times 500. And the professional development similarly is $500 per certified teacher. So that's how the calculation is put together in each of these models here.
And there is specific professional development requirements under United standards for the preschool program. So there is substantial professional development expenses.
So unlike 2 slides ago, these are costs that are every year. So they would need to be considered in your budgeting every year moving forward. So the next slide is just the total program cost. This slide just synthesizes all of the information that we went into in detail on the other pages. So you can see that the total program cost is $625,317 for our current model. That is what we are paying for our current model with a variety of funding sources. And it goes all the way up to $2.7 million for a universal preschool program. So if we didn't charge tuition, our funding streams would include our obligations for our general fund to service our special needs students. We will always have the general fund will always be required to pay some portion of a preschool program, even if it's 100% tuition-based program. So that will always be there. That's the second bullet down. I probably should have put that in a different order, but that's where it says special ed, that's general fund. So right now it's 1.2% of our general fund budget and increases to 2%, which stays the same all the way across. I talked about that before. We wouldn't need to we wouldn't be finding additional students with needs. It would stay pretty standard across all of the models. You see that the tuition, that third bullet down, is $0 because this model shows if you offered the true universal preschool program of free experience to all of our students, you wouldn't charge tuition. We would still be eligible for our school readiness and quality enhancement grants that solely support preschools. That's the $117,281 at the bottom. And then going back to the top where it says general fund, this is general fund expenses outside of special ed. So right now, the general fund, there's 3% of your general fund dollars that are supporting this program as we stand. No, sorry, that's not right now. That's with no tuition in our current program.
I'm just going to add in around the grant. So right now, we're not factoring in what other grants might support the program. We've been talking to the town manager around the town COVID funding, and we would love to have another playscape now with our current number of students. So, that's $100,000 expense that could be covered by town COVID funds. And there are other grants we might look towards. We talked about this last year around like the increased cost of a assistant principal. That might be something that we would use Title V for. So we haven't identified out of what the cost here would be, what are the grants we might use, because we don't have enough information about the grants at this time of the year. We'll know more about that when we're in budget season, so we didn't want to include it now because we don't know.
So the last part I just want to talk about on this slide is in that truly universal program with no tuition, we're looking at a 20% increase to our general fund budget to offer universal preschool. That's without the addition. If we maintained the tuition cost as it is this year at $6,750 per year and $2,700 for our half-day program, this is now the new impact. So 1.3% impact to the general fund. This is what the general fund is supporting right now. 1.3%. I misspoke on the prior slide. Adding one classroom, we're increasing it to 3.7%. Adding two classrooms, expanded B, 4.8%, expanded C, 5.8%, and our universal preschool program with our current tuition model would increase the general fund budget by 9.5%. The next slide shows you what it would look like with the tuition increase that we did speak about last year, sort of doing a 2-year phase-in to a $7,500 tuition program. And you can just see again across the board how it sort of how it impacts the impact to the general fund. So 1.1% for our current program, all the way up to 8.4% for our universal program, and the other percentages in between. We've had discussions before about really what the cost of the program is, what's an appropriate tuition. We've looked at comparable tuitions in the area, but I thought this slide was important to share because if you're just looking at the total program cost and backing out our grant funds, and then if we wanted this program to truly have no impact to the general fund beyond our special ed obligations, these are the tuition costs that we're looking at across the different models. So our final slide here speaks to our recommendations. Do you want to?
Sure. So as we were wrapping up developing this comprehensive look at different options for you, our team felt it was important to come to consensus about, well, what would we be recommending to the board to consider? We would recommend the expanded A model for next year. This would ease us into an expanded preschool model. So it's also the most economical expansion model. We would recommend it with the increased tuition costs to, again, ease it into the general fund budget. If the goal is truly universal, you have two things you need to do. You need to expand the program, but you also then need to begin to lower tuition over time. So those are very difficult goals to do it simultaneously. So we were really focusing on the expansion for this part of the phase. One of the things that we think is important is that this model addresses that disproportionality in the distribution of students with special needs across all of the preschool classrooms. Currently, we have ratios of 50-50 in our half-day program. This model brings all students to a full-day program, and it would have then a consistent distribution across all 5 classrooms. So right now, we have 50-50, and we can have a classroom with 0 special needs students. So this would address that disproportionality across the different sections. And we think that will lead to better outcomes for special ed students over time. We think that that'll be a cumulative effect. And we think that having the full-day model would also be a benefit to our students with special needs. And with that, we will open the floor to questions. We know Ms. Pettit has been writing them down as we go, as she told us. So.
Yes, so please just let me know or raise your hand. I'll call you if you have any questions. I don't have to start. I was going to ask Heather Pettit The question we ask every meeting, what's our current enrollment?
We have 3 openings. We have no half-day openings. And we have 3 kids on the morning wait list.
Okay. So I'm just confirming, I know we've said this twice now, so if we went full universal, which means every 3 and 4-year-old would be eligible to come to our preschool tuition free. 2023 and 2024, the projected enrollment is 200 students. So really, there's probably 200 3 and 4-year-olds that could be in our program, but may not be due to tuition and or space and or both.
Correct.
Are snacks free?
Yes, we
I'm
provide
gonna
them.
call on everyone, I just wanna get through mine and I'll call on each person.
Yes, we provide them free of charge.
They're free, right?
Yep.
Okay. That's all I have right now. Joe Zuzell.
Joe Zuzell, so in terms of the 200, I know NASDAQ says that's their projections, but we know that, the perfect example is kindergarten this year, right? So NASDAQ did not project that last year whatsoever. So we know that that can be kind of in and out as it goes. Is it a requirement to look at NASDAQ recommendations and therefore in the universal preschool model, say we have to be able to provide for the maximum number of potentiality in the area? Or are we just saying that that's NASDAQ, so we're going to shoot for 200?
There's no requirement,
Okay.
and many districts don't go through NASDAQ to get a projection. It costs money to get a updated projection. For us, we're like so on the line when it comes to our enrollment here at Gilead Hill specifically. I mean, we can look at our current enrollment for Hebron and get a pretty good idea that we're going to have a net zero change in classroom teachers at Hebron next year, at least based on our enrollment as it is today. For Gilead, for kindergarten, it's always kind of a moving target. We saw more, when we first looked at the numbers that NASDAQ projected for kindergarten last year, we thought the number seemed high. It was high compared to what our current enrollment looks like for the different grades. So we were more worried, will we actually get that many students? But we also knew that we had like 8 or 60 more kids that moved into town, that our enrollment grew from 635 in September, October, at the beginning of last year to, going off of memory, 668, I think, in June. So we saw that huge increase over the course of the year, which is families moving into town. We will be getting an updated NASDAQ projection so that we can use it for budget preparations. And so this is going off of the most current one, which is the one that we used when we developed last year's budget. So that's the number that we're using right now, but there's no requirement that we use that.
And as an organization, NASDAQ doesn't look at, census data in terms of who's moving into town. They're projecting what is current state within our county.
Right, and they look at birth rates.
Right. So that's an important thing for us to keep in mind in terms of the numbers that we think are going to increase or like where we can go. Like, it's not an exact dart. That's what I'm trying to say.
Joe Margatis or Ally Schweitzel, do you have any questions?
Yes, Joe Marquez, thank you. So a question here in regards to tuition. I know tuition was a sticking point in the past. So my question is, I understand some of our neighboring districts, and I don't know if it's factual, but I believe Marlboro charged for tuition. Do we have any idea of what I know tuition is all over the place, but do we know what the average family is paying for preschool programs outside of, I guess, inclusive of Andover, Marlboro, Columbia, our neighboring districts, as well as some of the local private schools as well? The reason I bring this up is recently as today, there was communication going on one of the social media pages where families were going back and forth in regard to different preschool programs. And so this is something we see all the time. So the dollar amount that we have today is $6,750 to $7,500. We can shoot for the moon and expand and spend all the money we want expanding preschool. However, if it's not going to be universal or it's not going to be in line with, what families feel like they should be paying and what we feel is a fair price, I'm very fearful that we're going to end up in the same situation we have now, where we're going to have empty seats again. And it's really not fair to the families in town that, they would love to send our kids to our program, but quite frankly, we're pricing them out, which is a huge concern for me. So I'll leave it at that.
I can jump in. So we did just run a recent DERG analysis, similar to what we had done previous years. So we do not have in that data private programs. So we did reach out to 27 districts that are comparable, so Andover, Marlboro, Columbia, Ellen, there's 26 districts that are comparable to us demographically and from a socioeconomic status level. Similar to conclusions of previous years, we have a subset of districts that only offer half-day programs. We have a subset of districts that offer a full day and half-day like us. So it's all over the map as far as what programs look like out there from comparable districts. There's one conclusion. From a cost standpoint, there's also a proportion of districts that have no cost. There's a proportion that have some cost, and other districts that have increasing costs, similar to our program. You look across those 26 districts, the average cost was around $4,300 charged to families for tuition. And if you look across that from most expensive to least expensive, we did pull out the programs that were no cost to do an equitable kind of comparison. We are near the more expensive side of that comparable group to keep in mind. So if that helps at all.
And I would say this, that our administrative team, our recommendation focuses more on the expansion model and less on the tuition model. The tuition model is really up to the board to decide how much cost they want to offset. And the administration doesn't have as much interest in that part. It really is about your cost benefit analysis of how fast you want to be able to expand the program and how much you feel like would be appropriate for taxpayers, how much you feel like it's appropriate for families to be paying. We really sort of defer to the board for that. Our recommendation is focused more on which expansion model we would recommend.
And also had one other thing, if I could, we did check with the Office of Early Childhood about our school readiness eligibility. That was a quandary of ours. Would we lose eligibility for those income eligible families? Should we expand? And the answer was definitively that we would not. But to Mr. Margaitis' point, there is a ceiling to be eligible for that based on income guidelines that change every October. So we wouldn't lose our school readiness grants, but certainly that doesn't mean every family would still have access to those seats.
Joe Suzanne.
Joe Zuzel. So in our current model, the Dean of Students is primarily responsible for the social emotional learning curriculum. If we were to move into an expanded model and that Dean of Students became the assistant principal, would those duties and expectations continue to remain the same? Can you talk about what that looks like in terms of who's going to be responsible for social emotional curriculum?
Yeah, I think it would primarily stay the same. I think there would be added responsibilities to be understanding that an administrator doesn't have to find contractual hours. So there will be additional work for them to be doing, and they're compensated for that work. Specifically evaluation. So it'll be maybe evaluating the staff within the preschool program and then assisting the principal. But we want someone that would specifically concentrate on the preschool program.
So another question too, and honestly, I'm just level setting. I'm just asking a lot of questions. So in terms of adding the special ed teacher, that's a NIAC requirement as well? No, it's not. So that's something that we would do because we are not going to, right now we're disproportionate. When we reproportion, we would want to have that support for special education students.
Correct. So special education students have a half-day program, 4 days a week. And their special education case manager is that classroom teacher.
Okay.
Dual certified. And they don't attend on Wednesday so that they can do their case management, PPT meetings, et cetera.
So I would add to that, yeah, it's exactly kind of what you're saying, Mr. Giselle. So K to 6 and typically K to grade 12, the case manager will have a series of students on their caseload across grades, and that teacher pushes in, co-teaches with the classroom teacher, and kind of migrates across the classrooms that their caseload students are on. We don't have that currently in preschool because historically speaking, from a foundational standpoint, we've had the half-day program, that is predominantly a 50-50 split, so that case manager has been solely in that room. So with the expanded A model and beyond, it would allow for a more typical K-12 case model approach. Yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead, I got
All right, everything's there.
So, I do have a question, and I'm not like trying to shoot it down immediately, but my concern is, before we make any decision, I feel like this is something that needs to go before the town. Because we're 7 people, on a board of ed, but if we're asking for the taxpayers to pay more, I mean, we just had a big budget jump this year because of enrollment, which was great. And the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen, supported us. But my concern is, if we go to the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen and say, well, we have 3 full-day openings, and there's only 3 people on a morning wait list, they could say, well, those 3 people on the wait list could have taken your 3 full-day enrollments. That was a choice that they made. So there really is no wait list currently. We're even. And my concern is, if we were to make this decision, we're then assuming that the taxpayers are going to agree with us. So I feel like before we move forward at all, because we don't really have a wait list currently, I feel like we can't respectfully go forward without talking to, the town. I think it would need to be a town meeting and get their input. How many parents of those kids that are out there are truly, some parents just don't send their kids to preschool. It happens. Some people choose to have them home until kindergarten. So before we move forward, I just feel like we need more information. And I feel like we need to have the town support on this, because this is a lot of money after a big budget jump. And my concern is that because we really don't need it. And I know, to Joe Margaitis' point, it could be the tuition. People may not want to pay the tuition. But that's the other thing. I mean, if we absorb some of that, where else are we cutting in our budget to do that? Because I don't see how we present another budget with an increase, which was needed for, enrollment, but then we're going to increase for enrollment plus absorbing preschool. And I just don't think it's fair to the taxpayer and the towns, especially when we have 0 people on our wait list right now.
Josie, so in terms of the para for toileting, in the expanded model for the 5 classrooms, would we be saying that one kindergarten classroom that's displaced would need that full-time para for toileting?
Yes.
And also, are we saying that we would not offer a half-day model with the expanded 5 classroom? Because it's obvious, if there's 3 full open, but there's a wait list for half-day, that maybe to Board Member Veneziano's point, there are parents that kind of want the half-day versus the full day. So would we have an option for half-day within that expanded model? Have we looked at that at all?
So one of the things we considered is allowing for students to do a half-day model. They would be spread out across the classrooms. So the class might have 17 kids at the beginning of the day, but they might have 14 kids by the afternoon. We also know that students at this age, they get tired by the afternoon, they all get a little cranky. Yeah, that might be the best way to handle that, because we do think that there is, for a half-day model, I think we would be promoting a full-day model. We think a full day would be best. So it also could be like you start the year in a half-day, we want to move you to full day as the year goes on.
What is proportionality? What is that definitionally? And is there data that suggests that the amount of inclusion in preschool programming affects later outcome? In other words, half day versus full day, is that connected?
So I guess go to our special expert.
I can start off again. So disproportionality is an interesting concept from a special ed standpoint. So the priority as a state, the idea of including all students regardless of background with all other students is kind of paramount across all education, right? So from a disproportionality standpoint, what we're talking about is the history of pre-K one time was half-day program only. All students who are eligible for special services must go and we must match that 50-50 ratio at a minimum. What we see over time is now most families are staying in the half-day program not laddering in if they have a student with special needs. But disproportionality as a priority and goal for us as a district is there. As far as the educational benefit for all students at the pre-K level, we would like to see all learners across all the full-day classrooms. As far as educational gain, the research speaks to more advanced gains for all learners, inclusive of students with IEPs, if they are included in the full-day program with a qualified teacher, and with typical peers from the start.
But is disproportionality, I'm trying to get at this notion of, is it something that's based in the research, or is it a policy initiative? And I'm not denigrating it at all.
I think it's both. I think it's we're talking towards the benefit of the research. We also know that Connecticut Department of Ed, I don't know if it's a lot, but it's definitely the expectation that we have to write every year in our profile performance report how we are addressing eliminating disproportionality in our program. This would be our program that has the largest disproportionality throughout the district. So that was a goal for us, is to address that in any kind of expansion that we would propose.
So the kiddos that are in the half-day program are overrepresented as special ed students?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Are there any regular ed students in the half-day?
Yeah, it's a 50-50 ratio.
So we never exceed the 50-50. So you always have a minimum 6 students without IEPs and 6 students with, or we never exceed that 50-50 ratio. Yeah.
Compared to a preschool class that may have no special ed students. 50-50 compared to 0.
Okay. And we have data that says that a full-day program bumps achievement in one way or another, social, anything, I'm just asking.
It would, yes. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And we've seen an increase in recent years as well across the full-day programs. If the family has a student with specialized needs, nothing disallows them from entering the lottery, for instance, right? So they might automatically be in our current half-day program, and then they might want a full-day program. So we have seen an increase in the number of students, but still that ratio is still lopsided. We might have 1, 2, 3 students with IEPs across the classroom of 17, so that's where the disproportionality piece comes in.
And do we get 100% reimbursement on those special ed students?
So it comes out of 618, a special ed IDEA grant, and we get about 7,800 from that part of the
Oh,
special education
Oh,
grant.
yeah, that.
For the reimbursement from the-
What's the-
$5,900.
What's the percentage-wise in terms of expenditure versus take-in?
There is no charge to a special ed student for the half-day program. If there is a special ed student that attends the full day, they only pay the half-day price, which is $2,700 a year. So it's our obligation as a district, as a public school district, to provide the special ed services for students starting at age 3. So it's paid for through the general fund and the $5,900 IDE grant.
And by doing this model, so I think this gets at part of your question, Chris, we will be receiving more money from the federal government for implementing this type of model that gives our special needs students more programming. We still get the same level of financial support that we get currently, which certainly does not come close to covering the cost.
So Heather, I have 2 more questions. One, and it might be for Mr. Larkin as well. We talked about displacement potentially of prep if we ever were to expand exponentially. Is that a program space at Hebron L that can be picked up? Because as we know, like our students that attend prep come from both schools and they're bused here, but could they potentially be bused there? Is there space at Hebron L if we did expand the pre-K program where prep could be held? With the caveat that that's a town program and not something we have to have in our building, but I just.
Well, there are no empty spaces, so it would mean displacing people who are currently in spaces and having things like art on a cart, for example. There are no empty classrooms for them.
What about the gymnasium?
Could the gymnasium be used for prep
Yes.
before and after school?
Yes.
It could.
And part of the displacement could be that prep just wouldn't have the space all day. They would have the space to use before or after school. So there's certainly before and after programs that are housed in schools where they don't have a room just to themselves, if you will. We don't need the room before and after school, except for we'll displace the teacher when they would be doing their planning before and after school. Prep could still use classroom space, but it wouldn't be a prep room in a classroom, it would be serving a dual purpose. The FRC room is another potential option for the youngest of the prep classrooms. They could perhaps, the Family Resource Center that AHM runs here at Gilead, that could be a potential space that the youngest prep class could use. We'd have to look at some shared spaces.
My other question, maybe this is for Mrs. Ariana. So Mrs. Benizano's point, right now we have 3 full days. We have people on the waiting list for half day. We have 3 full day spots. But I'm thinking history here before the pandemic, before COVID. I remember specifically that this is actually a big issue in town at budget time because we didn't have enough space and people were concerned that we have people in town, taxpayers, but not enough space for their children to attend. So is it, and I'm putting you on the spot here, I'm sorry about that, so I'm gonna apologize ahead of time. But is it your, and maybe I'll do it to Dr. Briere too, that way you can share those. Opinion, I guess is all of it. Is that because of the pandemic, we're seeing less students? Because I remember big wait lists, so that's my only thought moving forward, because we're, trying to think ahead, and I'm hoping this, we get to a little more normalcy eventually soon.
That is my opinion. So last year and this year have been the 2 years that we've not had a big wait list. The years prior that I can remember are always right around 12, 15-ish. And we have had quite a few, 5 parents maybe withdraw from preschool after they had earned a lottery spot, filled out registration paperwork, all of that, and then as the school year got closer and for a multitude of reasons have withdrawn their child from the preschool program because of circumstances that are unique to the pandemic.
Thank you for answering that.
And just again, this presentation was asked for from the board ahead of budget season. So last year, we considered proposing a preschool expansion when we were developing the budget. And then as you remember, I didn't include it. I included some information about what it would cost if you wanted to then add it later, but I didn't include it because I felt like the original superintendent's proposed budget already had a hefty increase that the town was going to have to fund because of our increase in our student population. So we had to add kindergarten class, that was a significant amount of funding. We haven't developed the rest of the budget yet. There was a desire from the board to engage in this conversation ahead of that time. And at this point, Caitlin and I really need some direction from the board. Is there a way you want us to go about developing the next year's budget? Is there a particular preschool model that you would prefer to see included as part of the original budget when it comes to you as board members?
So Heather, I have one more question, and then we can discuss that as a board, because I do know that you do need to have some direction to formulate your proposed budget. Do we have NASDAQ enrollment? I know we do. Do we have any updated NASDAQ enrollment for next year? Are we looking at an even larger increase in kindergarten? Are we looking at kind of the same, we went really a large percentage this year in the increase in enrollment. Are we looking at that same increase next year, or are we kind of leveled off for next year now that we have this huge increase?
So we don't have the updated one yet. Based on the history, in the current, if you go back to your budget book, it has projections for a couple of years. We looked at the enrollment for Hebron. I don't think you're going to be seeing a reduction in number of teachers at Hebron. They have one less 6th grade, and you know that they're a great teacher. People are just going to be shuffling on the deck. So you really look at Gilead, right? And this is your Anna and I were looking at what current enrollment looks like, so we can sort of think about what kindergarten first and second is going to look like. For kindergarten, still always like a moving target. I think you're going to probably still have 6 first grade slots. So your 6th kindergarten is going to move up to 1st grade. We might even need 7 based on some families that unenrolled, and based on the current enrollment, That's gonna be like right on the line between 6 and 7 sections. We're definitely not gonna be going down to 5. Second grade is looking at status quo, 5 sections, most likely. Possibly reducing to 4, but unlikely. So you're looking at roughly the same number of teachers here at Gilead as well. We talked about repurposing furniture from the kindergarten classroom down to pre-K, maybe, but we know that you're gonna need to buy new first grade furniture for the kindergarten class that's gonna move up to first grade. So you're still gonna have to buy furniture one way or the other. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
So we'll get an updated projections around November, but when we just sort of look, use the current one, it's looking about the same. So you're really gonna be adding 2 additional certified staff members. That drives most of the cost in this proposal. The additional preschool classroom teacher and the additional special education teacher.
So I guess I would just ask the board if please raise your hand, and Ally and Joe, if you could just
Madam Chair,
verbally let me know if you.
could we put a motion on the floor before we have discussion?
We can.
Oh, okay, no, it was just here, so I just want to make sure.
Yeah. So we can have a discussion, we can vote on a motion to direct the superintendent on a particular model when he's formulating the budget. It's really the majority pleasure of the board at this point, so I guess, Joe Margaitis?
Yeah, so I have a question. Is it possible, so my assumption, based on the data we have over the past couple of years, is that it's not so much a full-time pre-K program that is what is being sought out by parents. My assumption that it is half-day programs based on parents making choices at private programs throughout the area. Is it possible to get a combination of that and also the tuition? Is it possible to get a survey of families in town who have opted to not send their children to the Gilead Hill program to see specifically why they opted not to? I just want to make sure before we make any determination that we are pointing in the right way for the town and the taxpayers, to make the point.
My preference would be not to do a survey, but to have, I mean, I know you just did a whole presentation, but would be to ask people to, and, you know, if folks think, you know, we had a special meeting just on pre-K and we put it out there for parents to attend, we could do that one meeting by Zoom to allow for more people to potentially participate that might not feel comfortable because of COVID coming into a large space, even with masks. I would rather hear from folks if they're available than do a survey that kind of goes out to everyone in the town, and then potentially we don't get accurate results because anyone in the town, whether or not they have a child of 3 or 4, could fill it out because we don't have a way to kind of garner that or drill down, you know, to those families. So that would be my preference, not a town meeting per se, but maybe a special meeting where we would specifically say, the Board of Ed is looking at their budget for next year, 2022, 2023. And we would like to hear from families of, well, it'll be 2, 3, and 4-year-olds.
Doesn't matter, I would also say, 5-year-olds are the ones who, recently have gone through the painstaking program of trying to find the right preschool for their children. I think as parents, I think we've all been there at some point, and as our children age out of that, we kind of forget about it, and it's now on the burden of the next set of parents coming through. So I just want to make sure we're making the right decision, for all families coming up, those who don't even have children in the school system yet. And, it's the right decision for all taxpayers as well. This is, it's a big commitment. We got to make sure we do the right thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just hesitate to do a survey. I'd rather we invite people to join us I don't know if that's the will of the board or the majority of the board. And if so, if they would rather have that particular meeting via Zoom to allow more attendance.
Joseph, so I agree that it's important to get feedback from parents and families. I also know that, with our recent surveys and our recent special meetings, they have not been well attended or, well responded to. So I think it's important that we also sort of have a contingency plan or some sort of a direction for Dr. Baird and the team. We don't just rely on the special meeting results or the survey results because, as history proves, oftentimes for a myriad of reasons, we don't get the feedback that we're actually looking for. So, but I agree with that, with board member Marquez.
Just, my opinion, of course, I'm always for getting more information. If you want to do a special meeting, I feel Zoom is the best way because then we can have maybe more of an attendance and in a safe way. There's only so many chairs we can have here. My concern to move forward with this for this upcoming school year is last year when we were talking about budgets, we had hoped that COVID would kind of be winding down and it would kind of be in our rear view already or close to it. And we're not anywhere close to that yet. We're still, having issues with that. And if the attendance and the enrollment in preschool is being hindered due to the COVID, which I do completely understand parents' hesitation. My concern is if we brought it, my goal is I personally, I think to wait one more year and not do it this budget season for next year until we have leveled out. I mean, we may have more enrollment once if COVID starts to not, I hate even talking about it, I'm so over talking about it. But if it's more in our rearview mirrors, then are we going to have more kindergartners next year? I know parents are hesitating to put kindergartners in, and we're going to have that in our upcoming budget that we're going to have to, take account for, and we have to have the kindergartners be able to attend. So my personal thought is that we are still in so many uncertainties right now, unfortunately, and I would love to support this fully, but I just think right now is not the best time.
So Heather Pettit, I hear you, and I agree. It's a difficult time. I think we all feel that same frustration about so many things about COVID, in different ways, but in the same way as well. My only hesitation, I think, Joe Marguerite and I spoke to this last budget season, is that for years since that pre-K study, and even before, we keep saying we're going to do it next year, and then that never comes. We always say that. So that's my only fear of saying that. You're right. I agree with you that we might not see the numbers for next year, but then we might if, things change. And I think we all hope that they do, health-wise and pandemic-wise. And we see this big influx of folks that would like to send their children back to school in pre-K. We're not going to have that option available for another 2 years now. So that's my only thought, and I agree with always asking parents their opinion, and if you prefer a survey, it's not, I really like to hear from people, actually hear from them, but if the boards, would rather do a survey than have people speak to it, it's the will of the board. But I don't want to just dismiss it, because I feel like we've done that for so long years. That's just my opinion.
I'm just concerned
Christopher
about,
Hager.
thank you. I'm concerned about and this actually pings off what Amanda said. It's speculative. At this point, we don't know. So we have to be careful. We have to be careful fiscally. We have to be careful also with respect to divvying up our resources, both as an aggregate and also as an individual issue. And I want to say, very clearly and unequivocally that I'm very happy that the administrative team recommended the end to the left, the expansion that was more modest. I think that's very and very prudent, and I respect that, and all things being equal, if this was a different sort of budget season, it's not budget season yet, but I mean in preparation thereof, I would be in support of the modest increase that the administrative team thoughtfully recommended. But at this instant, it seems to me that it's very speculative. COVID's already slated my mind, but that's another story. I understand the uncertainty. And so, I mean, I personally would not want to act on anything tonight. In terms of directing the board, the administration to go in one direction or another. I guess I would be my vote would be to defer. And I don't know, informationally, it doesn't matter to me, survey or meeting, whatever people think and whatever they can get, whatever methodology gets the clear information to us is, I don't know what that answer is, whether it's, I hear what you're saying, you like the meetings, and people are so busy, even like take COVID out of it. Think of it, I mean, over the history of our tutelage with this board, it's the most attended meetings were maybe 20, 30 people, and those were unusual. That's my feedback.
Thank you.
Second.
So I feel like that this is getting towards like a policy decision for the board in terms of how you want our administrative team, maybe save for Mr. Larkin, to be spending their time. We had a difficult time here last week. We want to move towards planning out our tutoring program and working on our academic program, and not take anything away from preschool, but any time spent on continuing to work on the preschool model and project and soliciting information, et cetera, is time not spent on other things. And really by your next meeting, by the October board meeting, Caitlin and I certainly have an indication if you want us to move in one direction or another, just so that we can begin really getting the fine details done in the budget, because it does take several months to work on getting the budget presented. So that's what I would just ask of the board, is to consider how much time you're asking us to work on soliciting information from other people, and how much time you want us spending continuing to work on this project. Respectfully, if you're not supportive and you're not wanting to move forward in an aggressive manner, then it may be better to wait for another time, because there is a lot of competing priorities right now. And that does not take away from any of our desire to work on an expanded preschool model. But I just want to put that out there, that we're at days running on empty, and we're happy to do the work that you want us to do. But anything that you ask us to do will come at a cost to other things. So I just want to put that out there.
With that being said, what Dr. Baird just said, I think, personally, I don't think we should spend any more time on preschool at the moment. We have the tutoring program, we have kids who were out of school. There's so much that the admin team needs to do and react to on a daily basis right now. I think, our kids are out of school for several months. They have, there's been so much surrounding it that we don't need to rehash. What my concern is, having them do this, like you said, is taking away from something else, and I think we owe it to our current students to have them spend the time on our current students.
I just want to thank the administrative team for this presentation. These district advancement updates are everything that we hoped that they would be. And there's no surprise that you put a lot of time and effort into this proposal. This really, when we talked about, we want to see it. We want to know what it is. We brought that up in one of our previous meetings. this really kind of spells it all out in multiple different ways. So I really appreciate that. And I agree with Ms. Veneziano and Mr. Aker in terms of time and effort spent. I think, we have learning loss that we need to look at. We have scores that we need to look at. We have continuous protocols and mitigation strategies that are changing. We have social emotional curriculum that's in its second year. We have a lot of scores that we're bringing up. And, as much as I also agree that I think the expanded A is definitely the thing to look at, and I appreciate where that goes. I like how we're working on disproportionality as well as the assistant principal. I think all of that is good direction, but I don't think that this is a one-shot sort of thing. I think it's going to be a long-term sort of scenario, and I'm not sure that we have the time and the resources, not just fiscally, to invest in it this time.
Ally Schmeisel, do you have? I'm just asking your.
Yes, thank you, Heather. So no, I agree. First of all, I do want to say the presentation is excellent. I clearly so much time was put into this. It's amazing. I'm going to save it. It's incredibly informative the way that it's broken out. It's easy to understand. It's measurable. It's tangible. I just so appreciate it. So the only thing that I would add to the discussion is just the perspective that we are hearing from parents. We are, and so I think we all are in our respective roles. And and I'm not hearing, me personally, I'm not hearing from parents about preschool right now. I'm hearing from families about discussions around masks, how to make sure that kids are in school, through public comments and emails and calls and texting and things like that. So I just want to say that, we are hearing from families about what is on their minds right now, and I just think it's important for us to, keep in touch with the pulse of that. And I know I certainly don't want to, at this time, add this, I think, to the agenda for the administrative team to work on with everything else that's going on. I stick to my view, the last time that we talked about this, that the analogy that I have in my mind was visual of you don't build an addition on your house when in the middle of a storm. And I'm not saying that we're still in the middle of the storm. My hope is that we are coming out of this, but I just don't want to exhaust, the time and talent and resources right now, in my opinion, with everything else going on. So that's how I feel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Baird, or Ms. O'Leary, if we say to you, leave the preschool program as is when you're doing your proposed budget for next year, that would not include an increase in tuition, then, correct? Because the increase was only in there, am I right, for an expansion?
Well, so I'll take this one. In my mind, if we weren't looking at an expanded option, I would leave the preschool tuition rate as is. The board sets the tuition rate,
Right.
So it would be up to the board then to later adjust it, one way or another. But right now, unless I get a different direction from the board ahead of time, I would leave it as is.
So if, obviously, I have always been and I always will be pro pre-K because the data is there. I know some of our board members love data. It just is there that it's so much better for kids to be in a accredited program from 3 and up. I'm just going to say that right now. So yes, eventually my dream is to have universal pre-K where parents don't have to pay for pre-K. They just send their kids. We have room for everyone. I understand that that's not reality. I hesitate to put it on the back burner to even expand it, but I understand what everyone is saying about COVID. I do not, if we are not expanding pre-K, I do not personally want to raise the tuition. I'm speaking for myself, not for the board, obviously. I don't believe we should raise tuition. I just don't. So I guess my question is, since it looks like the majority, except for maybe Joe Margaitis and myself, is to leave the program as is, so that would be the majority of the board. So I would ask that, and I'll ask each person specifically, but I would direct Dr. Baird and Ms. O'Leary to do the proposed budget with our current tuition rates and our current setup. Because I really don't want to increase tuition. We can still decrease tuition later on when we're in budget season and we go through our budget. But that's a longer discussion. So I will go around the room. So Joe Zizell?
Aye.
I mean, it's not a motion, but I'm just asking if that's.
Yeah, I'm in favor of
your-
that.
Okay. Yes? Mr. Rieger?
What do we, I'm sorry.
So it would be directing, we don't really need a vote per se, but it would be just directing Dr. Baird and Ms. O'Leary to put in the proposed budget the current tuition program without an increase in tuition.
So basically, status quo.
Yes, and of course, it's something we can change later on, but they need a baseline.
I support.
Ally Schmeisel,
Yes, please.
Joe Martinez,
Yeah, right now, yes, with a future discussion on decreasing the tuition for the next calendar year or next school year.
okay, agreed, and we can have that preschool tuition discussion during budget season. All right, I do thank you all, I know it's a lot of work. I know you've done this multiple times, so I just want to thank the team. I'm sorry that we keep asking you to do this. At least you have stuff to go back on. And just kind of give to us, but I know you're working night and day with COVID and on weekends and on holidays, and I just want to thank you very much.
Look to that, I think that you're right. We do have a really nice, exhaustive, comprehensive look at what different options are. Numbers will update as things get more expensive over the years, unfortunately. But I think that there's aspects within the proposal too that you can look at that wouldn't necessarily result in an expanded preschool model, but enhance our program overall within the school that later on would set the stage for expansion later. So I think those are things that our team will continue to talk about as we're developing the budget, and we'll talk more about as we're presenting the budget. So I think that this was time well spent in the summer when we had the time to do it.
Right. Agreed. Thank you. All right, moving on, Dr. Baird, it's the superintendent's report.
Yes. So I'm going to begin with a celebration. So let me know if there are updated numbers, but I last heard we had 85 students turn in their Read and Run challenge from over the summer. So congratulations to those students for completing the Read and Run challenge. I'm going to go basically in order here from my written report. So in terms of district advancement plan updates, we did our initial STEAM curriculum work over the summer. Next steps really focus on engaging in professional development regarding performance tasks and finalizing our maker spaces. The STEAM curriculum team really is our library and media, our STEAM teachers, of course, but then we really went to include our art teachers, our music teachers, really bring out the A in STEAM, and of course, our challenge and enrichment teacher as well. So we'll be doing a lot of work, and I'll be doing most of the work with that team directly. Our Hebron Elementary School teachers engaged in professional development around the 6th grade math program. So we implementing the illustrative math program that is better aligned to our Bridges program that's in place K through 5. It also is aligned nicely to the state standards. We began very initial implementation work around our new data platform. And I say, we inked the contract. We're starting to do very beginning stage work with that new data platform. We did update the assessment calendar, and we'll have more to talk about with the data platform over the year. Our health and wellness curriculum team completed their scope and sequence. So they'll be doing their initial implementation this year, similar to how we implemented Choose Love last year. The health department team includes our school deans, our PE teachers, our nurse and LPN. That was a very strategic decision when we were hiring our nurses a year and a half ago. So we wanted our nurses to be a part of the health curriculum team and be out in the classrooms instructing, not just working in the health office. Our social workers, of course, and school psychologists, and our SRO. So our SRO is an integral part, especially during the first month for most grades. So I think that's going to be a nice comprehensive approach. Of course, it complements nicely with the Choose Love program. The Choose Love SEL program really is the majority of the health standards. And that's being delivered by our classroom teachers and is throughout our entire program. So this is really the other like comprehensive health and wellness standards that the team is implementing. We'll do a more exhaustive presentation on that work, similar to what we did with Choose Love at a later board meeting, probably November or December. The admin team participated in some professional development over the summer around effective family engagement practices. Both schools are looking at doing a book study on this topic at each school to build some more capacity and knowledge around family engagement so that we can then create some more action steps and an update of the district advancement plan at the end of the year. And of course, the preschool expansion planning was done in the ID presentation tonight. So that's the district advancement work that's happened pretty much from June over the summer. COVID operations. So we updated our COVID operations distance learning plan. We sent this out to families on August 24th. Of course, everybody knows that universal masking continues to be required by the state until at least September 30th. Well, assuming we're going to have some updates around that from the state over the next week or two. We are really looking at our arrival and dismissal procedures to identify ways to shorten these transitions. We did shorten some of those arrival times and dismissal times, but we're continuing to really look at that. Of course, you all know that we had a difficult time with some fast paces of cases that came in at Gilead Hill last week. We did send letters out to families about those cases with how we reviewed our mitigation strategies with Chatham Health. In terms of the distance learning, so there was a new law that passed around distance learning, and it basically eliminated distance learning except for high school starting now, with the exception that if you have a localized outbreak, you can use distance learning for a short term, which is what we had in this case. So that those distance learning days do count towards the 180 days. We're very much looking forward to more favorable community transmission rates, returning to where we were last May and June. As you probably remember, we didn't have any cases, except for one, I believe, during the months of May and June. We didn't have any cases over summer school. And actually, even last week, we didn't have any cases at Hebron Elementary School. All of the cases were here at Gilead School, primarily in preschool and kindergarten. When I've talked to some other superintendents, they're seeing similar trends with more cases in their youngest learners, preschool and kindergarten specifically. I'll move on to some other items. So I updated several policy and admin regulations. You received those in emails over the summer and the fall, or last week. They're all listed here within my report. Those are all the legal updates that are required for newly passed legislation. Our projected enrollment when we developed the budget last year was for 687 students. We are currently at 684 students. That's about as good as you're going to get in terms of matching your projection. We have 19 more students than we had last June. That's what that represents. And of course, there's more detail in the enrollment report. This summer, we did some work on our emergency response protocol. So we updated what we call our quick guide, our flip book that teachers have. Every staff member has to quickly implement like a safety procedure. So those are being printed. We're going to use them in training with our teachers and paraprofessionals, actually all staff. All staff will get training in our new threat protocols. This year, we'll be doing training in the fall. We'll probably continue that training into the winter and the spring. It's going to be continual training, not just a one and done. We had our new teacher orientation on August 25th and 26th. Teachers participated in professional development focused on teacher evaluation, responsive classroom, Choose Love, and then curriculum specific to their positions. And every staff member received our Hebron t-shirt, our Hebron Hero t-shirt, and a copy of the 10 Mind Frames for Visible Learning by John Hattie. We had convocation on August 31st. Our theme this year, as you've seen in the letters I've put out, is Together We Can Do Anything. Really are taking a collaborative approach to our action steps. So this is an ask of me to you. We are looking for some board members who would like to serve on our calendar committee. This is an annual tradition. The committee typically meets once or more if needed in October to assist in creating the draft calendars that will come to you. Last year, there was a desire from the board to look at doing 2 years of calendar, so to have 2 years ahead for families. So we're going to be attempting that this year. So if anybody is interested, please either let me know now or send me an email. Let me know if you're interested in being on that committee.
I've done it for the past 3 years, so I'm happy to continue.
Okay, great.
I'll do it too if you need.
Okay, great.
Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, 2 is great. So Amanda and Ally, that would be great.
Thank you.
Your personnel report shows, that this is the time of year we typically have more activity of people coming and going. You can look at that for some more detail. I did ask Ms. O'Leary to add a standing transportation update in her monthly report, so she's going to talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But I thought that would be of interest to the board. And I'll just say busing continues to be a huge challenge. If you were NBC Connecticut moved on from us and was focused on Thompson because they had to move to distance learning at their elementary school because of the number of bus drivers that were out for COVID tests. There just continues to be a lot of COVID in the community. We're still a red town, and we're definitely seeing some of the impacts of that. Before I finish tonight, I wanted to read to you portions of an email that I received from a parent. I asked if it was all right if I read this at the board meeting, and she said, please do. This is a parent who took some time to talk to the media and then was not too pleased with how her comments were spliced together. Good afternoon, Mr. Baird. My family moved to Hebron this year, and we just enrolled our 4 boys into school. I was so impressed with how smooth the transition has been and all of the hard work this past year that I dropped off some platters of goodies for the staff as a thank you. As I was leaving, the news flagged me down this morning to ask about the reopening, and I took the opportunity to sing praises about what an amazing job the district did making for smooth transitions for kids. Having everything prepared, having clear communication, and how wonderful the staff was. They asked me questions and then snipped it all apart into sound bites to make it sound like I was nervous. They asked what were my initial thoughts and how did things go. I said we were nervous, but after this experience, we felt comfortable studying them and that you guys had good plans in place. Very disappointed in our local news journalism and not accurately portraying the messages I was communicating. To be clear, I appreciate your direct messaging about protocols in place and why, steps moving forward, and the level of support we received from the teachers at Gilead throughout the process. We have pulled our children and homeschooled them due to COVID concerns, but made the decision to send them to school this year to meet their social emotional needs. We have had a positive experience even with a quick transition to the distance learning and having to learn new apps and programs as a new parent to the district as well. I'd like to thank every district level office, as well as the school, for their support, countless hours, and dedication to our children and community. I stopped to make the point of how wonderful the school is and how comfortable we felt having our boys attend Gilead after homeschooling and feeling nervous about COVID. I'd also like to say how much I appreciated our teacher, who during the beginning of the distance learning was such a calm and comforting ear. Everything was ready and logged on, but I didn't know what I was doing, and she so patiently took the time on me, reassured me, walked me through everything, and even met with my son one-on-one when he was upset for missing a meeting that I couldn't get him logged into. It really meant the world to me to have her be so flexible and understanding, but more so than anything, just a comforting ear and a kind person. You have a good team, and we are happy to have our boys in this community. I think that really speaks to the spirit of Gilead. It is a really good team, and they really take time to support our students and our families. And so I thought it was important for me to share that.
Thank you. I appreciate that in all of you. Business manager's report, Ms. O'Leary.
So my first section here is an update on technology. And I just want to highlight that, Dave worked to utilize some of our American Rescue Plan dollars to purchase some updated audio-visual equipment that's going to be used for family and community engagement activities to really have an opportunity to have more virtual participation and better sort of sound quality for our board meetings. So we can look forward to hopefully getting to see that roll out at our upcoming meetings. As far as our facilities updates are concerned, we, as we know, we have a new facilities director, Jay Bray. He started 2 days before school started and he's just hit the ground running. It's really taking time to get to know the team and has done a good job of sort of like honing in on the different skill sets of the team and where people are interested in sort of like expanding what they're doing and taking on more leadership roles. So it's been a great first couple of weeks. So I'm really excited to see how things grow there. For technology and facilities, we are waiting on some feedback on some grant applications. So we've got the FFC Emergency Connectivity Fund Program application, which would provide some access to internet and devices for families that identify a need. And with our facilities department, we're waiting on feedback on a school security grant, for which we applied for some reimbursements and for some previous expenses from prior years. My third section here is the transportation section. Dr. Baer just talked about adding on. So I just wanted to talk, we're all at this point very well aware of the driver shortage that's here in Hebron, across Connecticut. It's a nationwide shortage actually at this time. So DATCO is doing what they can to recruit new drivers. They're going to local fairs. They had a booth at the Durham Fair and at the Hebron Harvest Fair to have a face out there for some recruitment events. And they're offering sign-on bonuses. So for individuals who are interested in becoming a driver for the first time without licensure, the sign-on bonus is $1,000 and $3,000 for those who are fully licensed drivers. As you are, I'm sure, aware, there's been some delays in pickups and delays in drop-offs, and that can kind of get confusing. So we have reduced drivers. Why is that impacting pickup and drop-off time? It's really that there's fewer drivers working more hours. So when in the past there would be more drivers working more part-time hours and maybe not taking on as many runs. And now there's just not the drivers to do that. So we're pulling drivers from a further distance than we had in the past. So one example is we've got a bus coming all the way from Cheney Tech to do their first pickup in Hebron and just cannot get there in time. So outside of being able to hire on more drivers, really the only other solution is a shift in our school start time. To allow that driver to do their runs out in Manchester and get their way into Hebron and start picking up students. So we continue to be in as constant communication with DATCO, obviously, as I can, and send out updates as soon as I have them to our families. Not something I like to. Not a message I ever want to be sending out, but just trying to keep it clear, messaging as clear and concise as I can, and sort of help to explain that to everybody. So Rachel Clavett's been our point of contact for a lot of families, and she's been really helpful in communicating messages and answering questions when families have them.
I'll just add here two things. One, we only pay for the runs that run, so we do not pay for runs that are canceled. So I know that's been a question. The other thing that I just want to sort of highlight is we're looking at every possible solution. A solution to not having late runs is to literally adjust the start time and end time of school, and that would impact everybody. So that's not something we're considering now. We don't think that's something you do mid-year. That also impacts our staff. It impacts everybody. But if we continue to see this as an ongoing problem, that may be something we want to talk about in terms of next year's operations. We're really trying to look at every option on the table, and we are all ears for ideas to address the problem. But we really are doing the very best that we can.
Transportation. So the next section got the student activity accounts, updates, the budgets and the preschool budgets, that are all in your enclosures there for you. There is an extra, enclosure sort of sandwiched between the cafeteria budget and the preschool budget. And this is not something I would, unless you want it, but this is not something I intend to include every time, but I wanted to, it's a report from iVisions, and I included it for you tonight just so that you can see. This is part of the audit request to make sure that we're including all of our different fund accounts in iVisions. So I have some training days to do some setup work on some of those accounts. So they're in now, starting with July of 2020, and everything's, balanced through last year and moving into this year. So there's that extra piece there for you. With the grant updates, I already talked to the security grant and the FFC emergency connectivity grant. The other thing is the primary mental health grant, which is still, we're just waiting on all of that, but I don't really have a lot of grant updates for you. We've got applications out and we're waiting. The next section down is just the general fiscal updates with the regular updates on my work to address some of the concerns on the audit. So the first bullet was around, again, those funds not being in the system. I already said I had gotten our cafeteria and our e-funds into the system. Preschool had always been there. I'm just sharing the report so you can see that. The only thing left to do is student activities. So I just have to carve out some time to get those in, but my goal is to have those all in and updated through current time by our next board meeting. The next piece was around monthly reconciliation meetings. I had my second one of the fiscal year yesterday, so that ensured that we were on the same page as far as where we are with our spending through August 31st. So each month we meet mid-month to reconcile the previous month. So everything went well. We did our sign-offs as instructed. So we'll continue those meetings along. I continue to input vendors. I don't have much to say about that bullet. And the final bullet was around a formal process for reconciliation. So now that all of the pieces are in the system, there's a feature in iVisions where I enter bank statement information and reconcile it against actual activity that's in iVisions. And then Trish and I sit together and we both look it through and make sure the start balances and the end balances all make sense and outstanding checks and there's no questions, and you sign off and date it and file it away. So that is happening as planned. And then my last part of this presentation here is your year-to-date financial report. So there's uncommitted balances of $1.3 million, which is sort of what you would expect for this time this year. And a transfer request is enclosed. Does anybody have any questions about anything that I just went over?
No, I don't have any questions.
Just afraid there.
The transportation issue, that's pre-COVID. There's been a shortage of bus drivers. It's a compensation issue. And I know we're sort of in a weird position because we contract with bus companies, but what we need to do is to try and, I'm glad to hear that they're doing sign-on bonuses. That's wonderful. That's great. But they need to compensate bus drivers for what they're worth. They ferry around our children. And that's really important. And they're just not given the wages they need and are deserving of. And that's the root issue for buses, not COVID, in my view.
I just wanted to.
Dr. Beard.
Sorry. I just wanted to offer a comment and a thank you. I think that there's some very significant progress in terms of the financial reconciliation between the town and the board. It's a long time coming. And I appreciate our partners at the town and Ms. O'Leary and her time to move that in a more productive way forward. Thank you for that.
In regard to the transfer requests, I'm going to ask Joe Margaitis, since the Resource Management Committee met, just to go over two slight changes, I believe, before we make a motion.
Sure, so one of the changes, which is the gas and diesel, which is account number 6260. It'll actually be reduced by, if I have the numbers wrong, please stop me at any moment. Reduction of $6,000, which will be getting reimbursed through RAM. And with that, in order to make this correct, we would take that $6,000 back out of account 2100, which is benefits. So the sum of decreases requested will go from $46,485.33 to $40,485.33.
Yes.
Okay, do I have that correct?
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you. So do I have?
And we reviewed, we reviewed all the rest of the line item requested. Nothing out of the ordinary, so my recommendation would be to approve these. As
Thank you, Joe. So can I have a motion to approve the line item transfers as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Amanda Viviano moves, Joe Zuzell seconds. Is there any discussion? Can I go into roll call?
Chris Aker,
Affirmative, yes.
Heather Pettit,
Yes.
Amanda Veneziano, aye. Joe Zuzell,
Joe Zuzell, aye.
Ali Schmeisel,
Ally Schmerzel, aye.
Joe Margaitis,
Joe Margaitis, aye.
all in favor, motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you. Next is the chair's report, so I don't have a lot to report on since last time. Dr. Baird covered a lot. I was able to attend convocation with Dr. Baird and the staff on 8/31, and it was a really good day, and he instituted a really fun game, which I liked. I didn't think I would like a game, but I did. So that was nice, but it was a nice, really team building event. Everyone was outside, obviously, given mitigation strategies, but it's really a nice time. The building committee is moving forward, obviously with the roofing subcommittee, if you will, to discuss the roofing on our buildings on both the schools. I did inform them that myself and Joe Margaitis would be the board representatives on that committee. And I think that is all I have at this time, since we already picked the calendar Board of Ed members, so it'll be Amanda Viviano and Ali Schmeisel. So next on our agenda would be committee updates. So policy committee have not met. We will be meeting before the Board of Ed. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I apologize. The board liaison report is next on the agenda. I apologize. Diane Del Rasto from Board of Finance.
Thank you. I would have gone on with it, but thank you.
Thank you.
The Board of Finance last met on August 20th. One thing that pertains to you that would be of interest is that the town is still waiting for the state reconciliation of the water project in Hebron. And so just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. Nothing has come through since the last meeting. Still waiting. Okay. And that's about all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. All right, committee updates. Policy committee, we haven't met. Our next meeting will be at 6 o'clock prior to our next regular scheduled meeting in October. Joe Margolitis, Resource Management Committee.
Yeah, the Resource Management Committee met at 6 o'clock prior to this meeting today. We reviewed, besides line item transfers, we're also looking at salaries, business manager and technology coordinators. We feel that we need to get together some more data, which Dr. Barrett is working on, so we can prepare adequately for next fiscal year. So more to come on that.
Thank you. Joe Zizell, Student Growth and District Advancement Committee.
Did not meet, no updates.
Amanda Veneziano, Communications and Community Engagement Committee.
Did not meet, no updates.
Before we move on, maybe we could schedule a meeting just to, and also maybe invite Board Member Joe Zizell to talk about maybe our district advancement plan. And I know we talked about doing that in the later fall at some point soon. Amanda Veneziano again, PTA.
I did speak with one of their co-presidents today, Julia, and they are working on their PTA enrollment for their members. So obviously, they encourage everyone. They do have a great access to do it online this year, which is fantastic. It's a lot easier for families. And I just encourage, every board member to support the PTA, enroll as a member. I know, they support us, and then they do great things for our staff. So I would love it if we could support them. And then Education Foundation, Dr. Beard, did you have any updates from?
No, I'm not sure when they're planning to meet. I know that they're looking at, leadership challenges for their group, but they're folks that have been leading that group are being pulled in lots of different directions right now. I will say that when I spoke about the maker spaces previously, they haven't been doing any new fundraising, but they had funds to contribute to the schools towards our maker spaces that then were on hold because of COVID. And this year we're moving forward with outfitting those spaces. Probably not until winter, springtime, we're in the design phase, but we very much appreciate their financial support because that's how we're funding the outfitting of the maker spaces is with the previous fundraising efforts of the Education Foundation.
Thank you. Amanda Veneziano, School Readiness.
No,
We haven't done that yet. September 28th will be the first meeting.
Okay.
And Dr. Bird, do you know that I'm their new?
We just sent up invite today.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Ally Schreisel, Wellness Committee.
There's no update. We did not meet. Thanks.
Thank you. And Shared Services Advisory Group, we have not met. As I previously mentioned, there's members in the group from our partners in the community, other board members, other town officials that asked that we, given everything going on, that we postpone. I will say, now that we're going to be getting into budget season, I believe that now is a good time for us all to meet and see if there are any resources we could potentially share that would help us and them fiscally. So I will be scheduling a meeting. I'm just going to reach out to the group to see what works for them. Old business, there is none at this time since we had the preschool report tonight. Is there any new business that anyone would like to see on October agenda? All right, hearing none. Board member comments? Amanda Veneziano.
Two real quick. First, just to thank the admin team for the switching. I know it was a lot between, you just started school and then we had to shift to distance learning and just all the cases. So I know you guys have been dealing with a lot. So thank you for everything you do and to your staff as well. And then also to the parents, if anyone is listening, but I just want everyone to know, we totally understand the busing challenges, especially if it's, parents trying to get to work and pushing that off. It's not as simple as just a bus coming a little later for some people. And we do hear you, we do feel you. It hasn't been easy, but everyone has had a great attitude about it and is really trying to make it work the best. So we so appreciate the staff, Caitlin, for everything you do, for Rachel, for answering all the calls and whatnot, but then also to the parents who are really being flexible in this difficult situation. We totally understand.
Any other board member comments? Ally Schreisel, Joe Margatis, I'm just checking, just to make sure you don't have any before.
No, thank you, thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. All right, hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn at 9:07 PM?
So moved.
Joseph moved.
Second.
Second.
Ally Schreisel, second. Any discussion? All in,
Chris Aker,
Aye.
Heather Pettit,
aye.
Amanda Veneziano, aye. Joe Zuzell,
Aye.
Ali Schmeigel,
Alex, Michael, aye.
Joe Margitis.
So, Margaret,
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you all, we are adjourned. And thank you, Joanne, for joining us.
Thank you, good night.
Good night, thank you.